Like it fits his root beer from St. Louis.
I hope you brought some for everybody.
Now, wait a minute, what's the deal? You guys not 21?
Yeah, we're not 21.
Fake ID.
I got to celebrate 19 and 21. Illinois was 19. They took it away in January 1980. My birthday is January 26th, so I was illegal for 25 days. They did a grandfather clause in the people who were already celebrated twice. Where do you want to go?
Instinctively, I knew I couldn't come to this late and not miss anything, but I still got here on time.
Yeah.
Well, I looked at my pictures after the last year's alumni meeting. So I did work hard to do something about it, and I got it off.
42 people.
42.
I went to that yesterday and it was humiliating how many things I took. I knew two. Jeff came up with really hard questions. Well, I'll bet I have walked down the front wall and saw her 10,000 times. But I could not answer the question, who donated the sundial? Well, I now know it was a class of 1910. But I'll bet, and I've seen it. As soon as I heard it, I went, oh yeah.
You are an institution. No.
I was in a good state. Georgia, Florida, degree with Georgia. Poor people went around here. But the hospitals were a pain in the ass. They killed my wife because of all their nonsense. I couldn't bring her in food. She didn't eat for 5 weeks because the food was terrible. I couldn't get her doctors in to see her because they weren't regularly.
Okay, everyone, I think we're going to go ahead and get started with today's program. So it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Jeff Rankin. Jeff retired from Monmouth College in 2023 after having served 30 years in the Office of Communications, initially as Director of Communications, and in recent years as college historian and editor. His family history with Monmouth College goes back to 1939, when his father, Glenn Rankin, enrolled as a freshman. At Monmouth, Glenn would become a star athlete and president of the student body. After serving as a naval officer during World War II and a special agent for the FBI, he returned to Monmouth College in 1957, where he began a long tenure as Director of Admissions and later as Director of Development and College Relations. Jeff's wife, Terry Rankin, a 2000 Monmouth graduate, served nearly 3 decades as the college's Director of Alumni and Development Records. Their daughter, Amanda, graduated with Monmouth's class of 2002. Jeff's twin brother, Doug Rankin, class of 1979, so it is his 45th reunion this year. He was Monmouth's Professor of Theater and Scenery Designer for more than 30 years. In 2015, the Alumni Board presented the Rankins with the Family of the Year Award, rightfully so. Jeff was the editor and co-author of Monmouth College's 2003 Sesquicentennial, is that how you say it? I can't say it, but a Thousand Hearts Devotion. He currently serves as the City of Monmouth's unofficial historian, having authored more than 200 articles on Monmouth's history, as well as hosting a weekly radio program. So please join me in welcoming Jeff.
Thank you, Abby, and I want to thank the alumni office for scheduling me right after lunch. You know that the retirees like to take a nap after lunch. But seriously, I will try not to nod off if you'll do the same. Can you hear me okay with this? Yeah. Okay, well, it's really great to see so many familiar faces from so many different eras. I mean, I guess I started here in '92, so I did probably run into several of you over the years many times as you came back for reunions. And I've done this program so many times, it becomes a challenge to try to say some new things, but I think it's a topic that does not get too old because things do change. And the topic is our Monmouth College's changing landscape, or as you can see, we've come a long way lately. Now, Monmouth College for the past decade or so has had a very innovative program. It's the Rural Education Initiative, and as you know, that's an important thing. We're running out of teachers in rural places like Monmouth. It's a very problematic thing. So our education department is working diligently to try to train future teachers for places like Warren County, but also all over the country that's in need of teachers. And one of the things that this initiative, and it involves several schools, even one out in Wyoming, they like to work on this concept called place-based education. And this is a concept where you take pride, you teach pride in your place where you're born. And you may be born, you think, just in a cornfield somewhere, and but there's a lot more to it than that. They like from an early age of children to sort of understand the history of where they came from, the traditions, the arts, and also the economy, which is important. And they're hoping that this will perhaps encourage more of these children when they grow up to stay where they are in these rural locations and embrace that life and maybe make it a better place. So with that in mind, I'm going to talk a little bit about the place-based nature of Monmouth College and its history. And as you know, Monmouth got its start in the 1850s, and at the time, the college, or the town itself, had grown pretty big because the railroad had come through in 1855, and that made all the difference as far as the economy. In the old days, they had to take the cattle, or really the hogs, I guess, and other commodities to Oaxaca to ship them on riverboats, and that just was an antiquated method. So the railroad really opened it up, and Monmouth College had some real connections to the railroad. As you may know the name Ivory Quinby, who built Quinby House. He was one of the people that helped bring the Burlington Railroad through. And the other one, his partner, was Abner C. Harding. And just to give you a sense of what the, I guess I should be pointing here, of what this map is, it's actually looking southwest, and this is the town public square. So we're looking from sort of, well, just to the southwest. And it hasn't changed a whole lot. But here's Abner C. Harding, and he was one of Monmouth's original trustees, and he actually gave the land for the first college building. He also endowed the first professorship, which was in English. And the land for the first college was down here on North A Street and near Euclid, kind of where the Walgreens store is now. And the building itself was built in 1856, and it kind of resembled maybe an East Coast church or something like that. The whole top floor was it was a chapel, which was important to those young Presbyterians. The bottom floor was divided into 8 classrooms. And this served for a little while, but demand for education in Monmouth was really strong at that point, so it was quickly outgrown. And then here you can see the entire map of Monmouth in 1869. And that at that time, they really needed a new place for a college to be built, a new college. And so 2 brothers from Henderson County stepped forward. They were part of the South Henderson Church, which was one of the founding churches of Monmouth College. David Graham and his brother A.Y. Graham, and they owned land which now encompasses the college campus. And at that time, 6th Street, which is right out here, was the eastern border of Monmouth. Everything beyond that was farmland. So they gave 35 acres of land, and 10 of it was reserved for the college, and the other 25 acres was sold as building lots for people who wanted to build in the new addition, and that money was what would finance the building of the new college building, which would later be known as Old Main. Okay, so we'll step forward to talking a little bit about the landscape. And as some of you know, there was once a stream going through the campus, and it was part of Cedar Creek, which is north of town, and it meandered all through different parts of campus. It actually came through right where the football field is now, and went through this way, and there was a bridge where, you may have heard of the Kappa Bridge, where supposedly Kappa Kappa Gamma met in the early days to plan their fraternity. So this was, and when they were doing some studies for campus planning a few years ago, some of the campus planners came and they said, well, where was the stream? And they said, well, how did you know there was a stream? And they said, you could just tell, looking at the campus, there was a stream going through here. Well, this was problematic in 1963. Monmouth College had not really had any new buildings to speak of, except some dormitories that were built sort of on the eve of World War II and immediately after. And we did have Fulton Hall and Graham Hall that were built. Graham opened in 1960, but there was a real cry for a student center for the students. They had put a student union in the basement of Wallace Hall, and so President Gibson promised this was going to get done, and somebody chose this location at the base of the hill. Well, we had a trustee, actually 2 trustees named Fred Pattee. One was the father and one was the son. And the son was on the board at that time, and he was an MIT graduate, he was an engineer. And he argued that you can't build a student center here because there was a stream running through there. Well, they told him, no, you don't know, our engineers, architects, they all have figured it out, not a problem. Well, Mr. Pattee resigned, I believe, as a result of that. He was not happy. And the Pattee estate did not really come back to Monmouth until years after his death. But anyway, they built it, and as luck would have it, and Ralph certainly remembers this, every time in the spring when it rained, there was a chance of flooding. And I think it was in 1986 where it really flooded and tore out the bowling alley and the radio station and just made a mess. And so luckily, in the early 1990s, they put a 10-foot culvert right through the middle of the campus, and that has kind of contained that. But this was a cautionary tale that Monmouth should think a little bit more, and I think they have ever since before building. To go back a little bit earlier, again, there hadn't been much of any construction on campus, but in 1957 it was decided an administration building was priority. And as you know, today this building houses admissions, but in 1957 they did a real lot of shuffling of campus. They needed a place for the president's office, they needed the business office, physical plant, dean of students, dean of the faculty, admissions, just about every office was going to be in this, so they built this annex on the back. It stretched over to what was the old garage, and so that gave room for the physical plant. And this was kind of how Monmouth College did things in those days, because the Senate was pretty much all clergy. We did not have a lot of business people running the college at that time, and our presidents, of course, were all Presbyterian ministers. And another example, 1960, the Art Center. Some of you remember this one. This was originally a chicken hatchery by the Nichols family, and they finally sold it to the college in 1960. And Harlow Bloom worked pretty hard to get this sort of turned into a really nice, fairly nice building that had a gallery and all kinds of studios, and even like a foundry where they could pour hot aluminum. And then down below in the basement, it was converted to what they call the annex for the football field to have locker rooms, or for the football team to have locker rooms. Okay, so this all kind of, things just kind of stayed the same for a number of years, but 1965, things really started to change. And that was when Duncan Wimpress became the president. He was our first president who was not a Presbyterian minister, and he was only 42 years old, which seems kind of remarkable today. But he was a modern man. He wanted Monmouth College to become a modern campus, and he had a lot of ideas that would sort of really transform the way the college would be for the next several years. Before he came, the college was working on a proposed annex to the science building, which, as you know, was over there next to Wallace Hall. And they were going to name it after Professor Haldeman, and they had the architectural plans all drawn up, and they were raising money for it and everything. And then when President Wimpress stepped on campus, he said, no, he says, this is old-fashioned, we've got to do a new modern science building, so this was scrapped. And eventually it would result in Haldeman Thiessen and Hughes Library. He started what was really our first capital campaign of note, and it was called Impact. And it took a long time for that money to be raised to build a library and then a science building. And things weren't going really fast, but one day, Aileen Loya, who was the president's executive assistant, got a call from an attorney who said he had a client who wanted to make a gift in memory of their deceased son, and would the college be interested in a $1 million gift? So after she got herself off the floor and said yes, that became the name and gift for the Hughes Library. The Hughes family, Mrs. Hughes was named Maybelle, and she had been born with really thin eyelashes, and her brother was a chemist, and he mixed up Vaseline and coal dust and created the first mascara for women, and they founded the company which he named after her, which is Maybelline. And you may recognize some of these folks. Harris Hoggy, a librarian at the time, Franklin Johnson, physics, Jim Wills, geology, I think that's Clinton Peterson, and Bob Buchholz. Yeah. Okay, so 65 through 68 was, again, an interesting time. The college was really vibrant. It was still growing. we had a draft that had started, and a lot of students wanted to get in college and avoid that. So Monmouth was growing really fast. It did not have a lot of dormitory space for men. It had, mostly concentrated on women in the early days. And so at the time, of course, the country, the government was interested in colleges turning out scientists for the space program and everything. So they offered these loans that, they were supposedly beneficial both to the colleges and to the government. So a lot of the colleges took advantage of that. They built, what was a controversial complex for the fraternities, and still standing today, and then Cleveland Hall and Liebman Hall. And so when this boom for the college became a bust for enrollment, the college was in dire straits because it was still paying interest on these loans, and these buildings were not full. Okay. So things kind of plodded along for a number of years, and about the time I started here at Monmouth in the early 90s, enrollment had shrunk again to under 700, I believe. So the trustees, the president, they had foresight. They decided they would hire some people that could help with enrollment. One of those people was Dick Valentine, who I know many of you remember, and he came on board, and soon the college devised a thing called the Monmouth Plan, which basically gave any student enrolling tuition that would be equivalent to attending their state's flagship institution. And this really helped enrollment, and a lot of other colleges would copy Monmouth on this. So enrollment started to go up, and then in 1995, the first indication of that was they needed room, and Graham Hall had been closed for a number of years. It had been used, rented by Warren Achievement Center for a while, and Courtney Munson, who was a trustee, had a trucking company nationwide, and he used it for a dormitory for truckers to stay overnight. But it was a big kind of hulking building, mainly just needed paint and carpeting and that sort of thing. Main building project as a president of Monmouth. Okay, again, the next renovation, we're starting to pick up steam here. And in 1996, the old Carnegie building finally got a renovation that had been in the plans for probably 20 years. After Carnegie was evacuated as a library, it was used for a number of things. One thing that was interesting story, when in 1970 on that cold day when some of you carried all the books from the old library to the new, they had lowly columns in the basement to hold up the weight of the books. And when they were done getting all the books out, there was a space about this tall above the columns. So anyway, Scott's Student Supply, which had been in the basement of the Student Center, was moved here. A lot of you remember Jim Foster, who ran it, and Mary Jane Tippett. And so that was here. The Dean of Students office had been here for years anyway. And then upstairs, Jim DeYoung started an experimental theater called the Red Barn East, which was named in honor of the old Red Barn. And then they had costume storage upstairs. So the building was kind of a mess. In the basement, they also had some classrooms and the old Oracle office, and the ravelings were done down there. So anyway, Harold Poling, one of our notable trustees, interesting story, he came to Monmouth from Virginia. During the war, he was here as a pre-flight cadet. And as many of those young men were, they loved their Monmouth experience, so he came back and enrolled as a student after World War II. Poling went on to become chairman and CEO of the Ford Motor Company, and one of a number of our just ordinary students who excelled and became titans of industry. 1997, Quinby House. As you can see, it had seen better days. Deferred maintenance, I guess you could say. The trees had overgrown it, and it just was in bad shape. There was a family of groundhogs from the cemetery next door that were coming under the porch and eat the carpeting on the porch. So again, the history of Monmouth with Ivory Quinby and his railroad connections. In those days, the state of Illinois had some money for historical things. So because of Ivory Quinby's tie to the railroad, Pete Loomis from our physical plant was able to get a grant to renovate this house. And they did a really thorough job. And also Walter Huff, one of our other notables, came forward to help pay the bill on that. 1997, our first really big renovation project was McMichael Hall. And McMichael was built in 1914, and at the time it was considered one of the finest dormitories in the Midwest. It was state-of-the-art in every way. Most of the top floor was actually a gymnasium where the young ladies could play basketball in private and not have to show their ankles to and the college's first dining hall was in the basement where the bookstore is today. And also, in those early days, they had what kind of preceded the microwave oven. The big fad in the early 1910s was chafing dishes. They had a chafing dish room, and the young ladies could prepare meals on chafing dishes. That was considered really great. All the young women who enrolled were given a light bulb at the beginning of the term, and they were responsible for that light bulb. And if anything happened to it, they would be charged. Okay, 1998, we had the beginning of a really big building program. That was the inauguration of Dick Giese. And it was also what we would call the end of landlock. And as you probably remember, for years it was said that Monmouth could not expand physically because it was landlocked. It was right in the middle of the residential neighborhood, dozens of houses. We had buildings that were interspersed with houses, and it was just, the campus just it wasn't cohesive. So Dick Giese's idea was we can slowly and gradually, intentionally purchase properties as they come available and begin to make a proper college campus. In 1998, that year, they began turning some of the streets that had been the city. They were removed with the consent of the city. Some of these, we actually had a house moved over, it's right across the street here now. And this would kind of really make the west side of campus what it is today really attractive. And as following year was beginning of every summer for years and years, it was constant construction all summer long at Monmouth College. You would hear the beeps of trucks backing up. It was just, it was a constant din. And so 1999, not a whole lot happened. The old ATO house was renovated, turned into a place for the English department and for teaching and learning and for writing assistants, that sort of thing, and a computer lab in the basement. The first of many Stockdale Center renovations was held then, and there was a 9th Street parking lot put in, and at that time, there was a growing need for a place for cars because every student had to have a car. The day that, I think it was the first day that Dick Giese was on campus, I happened to be in his office, and he said he was going to go out and do a little tour of the campus to look at the athletic facilities. He had come from Mountain Union College in Ohio, which is a powerhouse Division III football team. And he really wanted to see what we had, and he came back deflated. He could not believe it was as bad as he thought it was, or as he saw that it finally was. And so he got assistance from various donors, specifically Saf and Betty Peacock came up with a gift to help turn this cornfield into a modern football or baseball field and soccer field. What's interesting is the college had owned this cornfield, which is at the corner of Route 34 and 11th Street since the 1960s. That was where it had been intended that the new football stadium would be built. That never happened, obviously. Also in 2000, the family of Commander and Mrs. Boone sold the house that they had lovingly maintained as a museum and a teaching facility to the college, partly as a gift, and that would be used as a retreat center. Okay, the first of our new residence halls, one you're enjoying now, I guess. Bowers Hall was completed in 2001, and Dave Bowers, who was chairman of the board, wanted a legacy that really students would remember their Monmouth experience, not just in the classroom, but through the living and learning in their residence hall. So this is the first to be built with suites, and it had air conditioning, and it was really like a whole modern new stuff for Monmouth. And over the years, Dave has added, done additional gifts to upgrade it and modernize it further. 2001, Boucher Plaza, that was a gift given by Virgil Boucher, one of our great former football players and coaches, not our coach, but in memory of his family, and outside the library going into the football field, and of course the Scott Spirit statue wouldn't be erected there until 2015. And then more Stockdale Center renovations. I think students, admissions felt that, having more variety for students is going to definitely help our admission efforts. Another big thing happened in 2002. Hughes Library, which had just been, it had been virtually unchanged since it was built in the late 60s, finally got a much needed upgrade. And it had been built during that era when fortresses were kind of the architectural fad. There were hardly any windows, they were narrow slits. So they actually cut holes and put in 36 windows and just lightened up the inside so much. The other thing is when they built it, they did not have the funds to build the top floor. And so that was unfinished, left unfinished originally. It was all concrete with light bulbs hanging down there, light bulbs. That's where they stored the government documents at that time. So finally, it was able to get a nice, modern, carpeted, with galleries and lighting. Everything was great. The best thing about the renovation was air conditioning, because since the energy crisis of the early 70s, Hughes Library had not been air conditioned, which is just not very good for things like valuable old documents. We also built a tennis stadium that year, $1 million tennis stadium, which incidentally just got a resurfacing. And you remember the old tennis courts there by the student center. This has made it a huge difference for our tennis team. And then the LeSueur Nature Preserve, Bill LeSueur and Arlene from Class 43 took 15 and a half acres adjacent to the Peacock Athletic Park and put in a beautiful biological sort of study space that had different habitats, and also a 1 mile hiking trail. And 2003 was a big year with the Huff Athletic Center finally opening, and Big Easy, of course, thought that for admissions, it was a necessity that we have something like this, partly because fitness was becoming the rage with college students. They had to have a place where they could work out on a daily basis. But also, the old Wade pool had gone kaput. It wasn't usable, so we had to abandon our swimming for a time. And also, we had one of the nation's strongest track and field programs in Division III and had never had an indoor track facility. So that was all seen as necessary to really get us up to the 21st century. We also have an educational wing, and but the neat thing is they were able to combine all of the existing facilities, the 1925 gym, the Glenny gym, which was built in the early 80s, and then the modern new ones. And it was literally, they were trucking dirt out of that probably 10 hours a day for, I don't know, weeks and weeks, maybe months to excavate that area. But that made a huge difference, and thanks to Walter Huff, it was dedicated to his wife Elizabeth, who passed away, but he saw the importance of athletics, not just for the college, but for admissions and the health of students. So 2005, Dick Giese moved on, and Murray Ditzler came in, and one of his priorities as the new president was to build a new science center. He had experience doing that and had been at Wabash College. First thing, this was already under construction. Pattee Hall, our second new dorm and it wasn't named Pattee at the time, but it was later. In 2006, the manor, Dick Valentine had lived there and renovated it, and it was given to the college as a guest house. Austin Hall, the old music building, was renovated, and David and Mary Fleming built a plaza to kind of make the space more usable behind Wallace Hall. 2007, our third residence hall, Gracie Peterson Hall, and a new parking lot. Those were important at that time, built where the old hospital used to stand, and Weeks House, which was named for Stafford and Winifred Weeks. It gave a place where we could have philosophy and religious studies, and also the office of the chaplain. 2009 was a time when April Zorn was actually the second wife of Walter Huff. After Elizabeth had died, we met her from the college days. They got married. Sadly, she died of cancer, and he wanted to recognize her with a brand new renovated stadium, which was sorely needed. And it really was state of the art. Has a beautiful press area, suites, air-conditioned suites, and then it's got a field of turf, which is now being replaced this summer. Also a video scoreboard. So that was kind of brought our athletic facilities up to the most modern they could possibly be. 2010, we established the educational garden, which has continued to grow, and I've talked a little bit about place-based education, and this is certainly tying into our efforts to teach young kids how neat it is to grow things from the earth. And this was also the start of our, what we call our Greek Life Initiative. And this was, the idea was that Monmouth, by really focusing intently on Greek life, could make a huge difference in retention and in the quality of our students. Greek organizations are very well regimented. The whole thing of the Animal House drinking is kind of a thing of the past. And so it was felt that we could, if we really had top-notch facilities, we could really make a difference through our Greek life. The old Woodbine, which stood and housed ZBT, had been taken down during the Haywood years. So they decided to build a Queen Anne style house there. Of course, the women had not had houses. The home of the birthplace of the women's fraternity movement did not have sorority houses. They'd gotten them a few years earlier, but Alpha Xi Delta had come back on campus and had gone away for a while. So Kappa and Pi Phi already had houses. They weren't what they are today. And it was decided that they would let Alpha Z be the first residents of this new a brand new house. Kind of backfired on Kappa and Pi Phi because everybody wanted to join Alpha Z and live in this beautiful house. Okay, 2011, again, the admissions building, they wanted to make it more just specifically for admissions, so they just tore down the old ugly annex and made it kind of a new facility. And also they put in a parking lot out of 11th Street, again, because we still had way too many cars. And then in 2012, Judge Scott Klukas, local judge of many years, deeded some land north or east of the campus that became a market farm. Judge Klukas was an interesting guy. He was a widower, and he would hang out in our cafeteria and eat his dinners every day with students. He loved talking to students. They loved talking to him. So it was kind of a nice legacy that he left for the college. And the market farm continues to grow. We just had a teaching facility that's actually a yurt that was dedicated earlier this spring. Okay, finally, Maury Ditzler, who had come with the intent of building a science building, was able to see that realized. Now, the college also was in dire need of facilities for a business. And they were in the old McMichael Science Building, but business and accounting were two of our really strong programs. So it was kind of, it created sort of a difficulty because they felt they could raise money to build a science building, but they weren't sure they could also raise money for business building. So that's when talk began about combining them into one congruent facility that would have everything in there. And then they started talking about, well, this actually makes sense. We really do need students to straddle both worlds of business and science as technology increases. We need scientists who understand how to market their discoveries. We need business people who understand technology. So that was sort of the whole plan behind the Center for Science and Business. 2014, Clarence Wyatt became our 14th president, and right away there was a new building on campus, and that was courtesy of Harold Knapheide, whose mother had been a Pi Phi at Monmouth years ago, and for years he'd been thinking of doing something like this, and built this really unbelievably beautiful facility for a Pi Phi house, which I think is really fitting because this is the original home of women's fraternities, so Monmouth ought to have a show place. And there's even a room in there that celebrates the history and the origins of Pi Beta Phi. 2017, Dave Bowers came back, and again, we were looking for parking. Unfortunately, this isn't available to you this weekend, but he decided to pay for putting in a parking lot to serve Bowers Hall. And this was kind of a challenge because with EPA regulations, you have to have a separate storm sewer from the regular sewer. And the only way to do that from the parking lot was to run a sewer all the way across campus to the Huff Athletic Center. So they had to do some major tunneling to accomplish that, but now it's a very usable parking area. And again, Kappa Kappa Gamma was not to be outdone. We had a Vice President, Tim Kefauver, from the class of 1980, who had left Monmouth. He had renovated this beautiful house across from campus. It actually served as a fraternity house in earlier years, but it was purchased and continued to be renovated to house the captains. So now we have the Monmouth duo, both with grand houses and Alpha Z as well. Again, we did a makeover of the dining hall in 2017. Things just continued to evolve, and there was a need for a more modern, a little sleeker dining area. This was an interesting project that began in 2011. The physical plant had to find a place to move because they had been out on 11th Street. Some of you remember Penny's Tap. They were out there, and that all got torn down to build a parking lot. So they moved the physical plant out to the old Kmart building across Route 34 bypass. And that worked well for them, but the development office was growing, development and alumni relations, and they really did not have a place to expand, so it was decided they would move development and alumni out to this facility. And they did a beautiful job renovating it, but it wasn't ideal. You really want your alumni headquarters to be somewhere on campus. It just didn't work too well. So in 2018, that ended, and the building was sold to Fairway Foods, where there's now a modern new supermarket. 2017, 2018, one of our really grand old dormitories. This was built right on the cusp of World War II. The women didn't have long to live there because they had to move out like right away when the naval cadets came to campus. But it's really one of our beautiful dorms, and it took some some good planning to make it something that would be appealing to today's students. One of the things they did that really is amazing is put in these new restrooms that have private stalls for students. They don't like the gang showers and that sort of thing. So that was good. We also had started a special fund that would allow the college to do programs like this based on need rather than having to go out and raise money for specific projects. So this was the first project done using this funding system. 2018, this house has seen more things than probably anything on campus. It was purchased in the early 1950s as a presidential home for James Harper Greer, and Gibsons lived there. Then when Quinby House was received, it was converted to apartments, and then eventually ZBT had its first headquarters in this building. It was known pretty much as the Manor. Later it was used for development and alumni, various other things, and then Bonnie Shattuck finally bought it, and then in 2018 she did some major work to really make it beautiful, and today it's serving as our guest house for alumni. Share Hall, it actually had a name. This building is where development had moved. Also in that year, it was purchased right after World War II for young women to live in. College owned it all those years. Since the development alumni have moved to the old ATO house and Owner Center, it's available. And this is one of two older houses that are slated for conversion to fraternity usage. And this one would be, I believe, the ZBT house. 2018 physical plant, because they had to move away from the new Fairway Foods, we purchased the old funeral home on North Main. And so this is where our campus services are where the physical plant is, and there's a garage there that can be used for that sort of thing. Mail, everything is located out there. 2020 beautification thing. First Lady Logie Stone had looked at the space directly behind this building and thought it would make a natural amphitheater. Bill Trubeck, class of '68, had built an area beyond that with a fountain as a tribute to his late wife Judy, and he was approached and agreed to expand that and build this sort of natural amphitheater that can be used for various purposes, from performances to classes, that sort of thing. 2021, John Dahl, class of '75, gave this sort of really interesting new area behind Wallace Hall, which is a labyrinth, based on the one at Chartres Cathedral in Paris, in France. And so it's a place where people can sort of meditate and walk the labyrinth. 2022, the old ATO, or the old Theta Chi house, came into a new usage. It actually had been used for similar things. After Theta Chi closed, there were some Franciscan monks that actually lived there in the building for a while. Then in the more recent years, it was used for international multicultural students. And finally, through the efforts of a few people, including Regina Johnson, who is right here, it was renamed the Champion Miller Center for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. And Champion Miller is an interesting man. He was born into slavery in Kentucky. He purchased his freedom. He came up to Monmouth, bought his wife's freedom and his daughter's, and Regina, as a student, had written a paper about him for Bill Urban, and thought he would become he would just sort of epitomize what we're trying to accomplish in our DEI efforts, because he was such an inspirational figure. We actually, he was buried in Monmouth Cemetery without a headstone. And so there was an effort a couple of years ago to actually get a headstone. So now he has a place of honor at Monmouth Cemetery where people could go to perhaps mark Martin Luther King's birthday, things like that. 2022, this was not a good October. There was a storage room in the back of in the lower level of the kitchen, and probably an electrical spark caused a fire, and it wasn't like a major fire they had to put out, but the smoke damage was significant, and it basically went throughout the entire building, causing the building to have to really undergo a complete renovation. And so a lot of creative things had to be done over the ensuing months. Finally, the cafeteria area was able to be reopened while the rest of the work was being done inside. And so finally, this year, it's nearing reopening. It'll be a nicely redone modern facility, and they actually used student input in designing what kind of facility it would be. Just recently, we had the dedication of the Pris Adolphson Arbor, and Pris was actually the sister of Bill Trubeck, who had the fountain there already, and she and Judy were sorority friends from college days. So there were new maple trees planted behind there. It was a very moving ceremony. And that area of the college continues to really be one of our top beautification focuses. Now to go back, just to give you a sense of how things have changed, as the campus has expanded, virtually doubled from the old days, from about 30 some acres to 75 acres. All of these streets used to come through the college. Archer, Boston, College Place, Detroit, all of those have been absorbed into the landscape, more or less. And Clinton still comes through, serves Graham Hall and Patsy Hall and the library. And here you can see, as a result of those roads coming out, we have this beautiful new green space. President Ditzler, when he was at Wabash, they had a similar kind of quad in the middle of their campus, and he thought that looked pretty nice. And at one time, they were talking about building some possibly small fraternity houses or other buildings in this area. And then they decided, no, it's just beautiful, let's leave it open and landscape, and it'll be sort of the focus of the future for Monmouth campus. So here, just to give you a sense, this was the campus 24 years ago, pretty much. 9th Street, we had the old dorms here. Of course, Wallace Hall, Gibson Hall was still there. And we had the Lenny gym had been built, but not the Huff Athletic Center. So it was small. It was a small Midwest college. And here it is today, so you can see it's pretty much doubled in size. The addition of the Center for Science and Business has really opened things up. You have those two modern facilities right next to each other. We've got the modern football stadium, and things just continue to grow. So I hope it gives you a little bit of sense of how we've gotten to where we are. It's been a long road, but again, a lot of this has happened within about a 12-year period. There was $120 million spent on new improvements, and that was thanks to the generosity of alumni in the youth. So thanks for your attention. I'll try to answer any questions, but I will say I won't answer any questions that aren't historical because I don't work at the college now. So I would have to, kind of cut it off at my retirement and let somebody else, maybe Mark or somebody, comment. So any comments? Yeah.
You know the name of the creek they want to serve?
Well, I don't know that it has a specific name. I know that Markham Creek is the one that goes through, that goes through, where the water treatment plant is, across 11th Street. And so it may be a tributary from Markham Creek.
I've heard that before on that. I just wondered if anybody wanted to
Yes, right. Yes.
We have this new Black Box Theater library, which that space used to be the Bonner's electronic classroom. We were trying to figure out what was it back when Hughes was first.
Originally, yeah. That whole area, that whole side of the basement, there were a lot of rooms that were used for seminars and that kind of thing. I don't remember if that, it might have been actually 2 rooms that were expanded and they built the sort of raked seating in there because there were probably 8 or 9 actual little seminar rooms along there. I couldn't tell you for sure, but I think that's what happened. Yep. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you very much.